Let me tell you, I was hit on the head, and stupefied recently by this fantastic, lazy method of starting and growing seeds outside. Yes, outside. It's called winter sowing. Many of you may have thought that planting seeds inside is intimidating and time consuming and expensive. Well, here is a method you can try that is none of those things. I've spent the last week or so reading articles and watching every video about the ins and outs of winter sowing. So I've summarized everything and I'm sharing it now with you in this video. It's a marvelous way for you to expand the beauty, bounty, and healthy ecosystems in your own yards without much work, all in a milk jug. This method was created by a woman in New York about 20 years ago. Her name is Trudy Davidoff. She loved gardening and seed starting, but lived in a little cottage in New York, and she didn't have the money or the space or the materials to start outside plants inside. So she thought about the way seeds are started out in nature and figured out this simple way, simulating the whole process. Her simple idea has caught on and is spreading around the world. She has a Facebook group called Winter Sowers. You can go on there with the other over 34,000 people and learn everything there is to know and get some great ideas for either beginners or experienced winter sowers. She also has a site called wintersown.org where you can go and learn even more. When you think about it, in the ground outside, there are seeds waiting for the right conditions to sprout and grow. They need a cold period, and they need the elements of nature to prepare them for their functions. Well, here is what she created to simulate that process, and this is how you do it. You gather materials that you probably have in your house already. Here you see I've made a little greenhouse that will stay outside for the whole winter without much care or attention. It may seem a little fourth grade science-y, but people are having great results with this method. And people argue that plants grown in a jug have no weeds, they don't get the interference of squirrels or chipmunks, and they are stronger and healthier than plants grown inside with warming mats and grow lights requiring lots of TLC. I don't want to take anything away from people who start seeds indoors. It's a tried and true method of winter gardening that brings gardeners lots of joy and satisfaction. And I will be growing seeds inside this year too. This is an alternate or additional way for you to try. The time is right now to start, or soon, and it's easy. Now let's get to it. First and foremost, clean the jugs first with a little dish detergent by shaking and rinsing it out. Then you mix a solution of 1/10 bleach in the water, which comes to about 1.5 cups of bleach to the whole gallon of water. You shake it and let it sit there for about 10 or 20 minutes. You rinse it well, let it dry out for at least 1 day. Don't skip that part. Starting with clear materials can make a huge difference. You don't want to be growing uninvited bacteria in with your seeds, especially when you set up your seed environments with high expectations for beautiful new plants. Okay, you're going to cut your milk jug like this. Actually, first you're going to poke holes in the bottom of your milk jug. I found that a sharp pointy knife works best. Make sure your hand is not in the way. Just push it in, turn it a little, and about 5 or 6 holes will do. Okay, then you're going to poke in a few holes near the top for extra ventilation. You cut your milk jug or any bottle or jug that's clear and large enough with a knife or scissors. These milk jugs work the best, although you can also use juice bottles and soda bottles, or even those rotisserie chicken containers or other plastic containers. Comparing all of the tools I saw, this really is the best method. Except when you're cutting this type of container. I tried to do it with a knife and it wasn't working. So I got my drill out and I just want to make sure I'm clear. And I'm just going to poke some holes this way. This really could be sharper. As you can see, the container caved in a little. That's okay. I can push it out once I cut around the edges. I really need a better screwdriver here. This point is very dull. Let me go back to this one to show you how I measure. You're going to take your ruler. You want at least 4 inches of soil. And that 4 inches should come right below where the handle is. So here we go. Now, as you can see, this still has the label on it, but for all of the others, I put a warm compress on top of them with a little soap in there and let it sit for a while. And then after that, you can basically scrape it or peel it off. This old Pampered Chef scraper still works so well, and I've had it for probably 17 or 18 years. Okay, so right next to the handle here, I'm going to make a cut. And then I'll take over with my scissors and go all the way around, each time seeking the next marker spot so that I can make the hinge kind of straight going around. I'm going to cut all the way around to almost to the jug handle, and that way I can open it easily. That's our jug handle. The next step is, I've seen a lot of people do this, put a coffee filter in the bottom. See, I used a piece of tape to pick that up. That always helps, so you don't have to pinch it and rip it. I turn it upside down, place it in the bottom. This helps to prevent slugs or worms from getting inside, and it helps to hold some of the soil back from draining right outside the holes. Okay, next, let's talk about the soil. Now you add your pre-moistened soil. I am talking about potting soil that you moisten to the point where you can squeeze some of it in your hand and it does not drip, but it kind of holds together. So see that? You don't want it too wet or too dry, just right, okay? Now this is planting soil. You can also use potting soil. It can have some little fertilizer bits in it, but you never ever want to use any kind of moistening agents in your soil. You might tend to think that you've got the edge, but the seeds will be doomed. With unnatural moisture retention, algae and bacteria are likely to form and inhibit or kill the plants. So that's it. You use planting soil or potting soil. Nothing else. Not even my beloved compost at this point. We'll add that later. Okay, so we're going to put this in here. As you do, press down lightly. Make sure you get it out to the edges. You know, the soil outside is pretty pressed. You don't want it compact, but you want it pressed down pretty well. Get that air out of there. Okay, next you're going to, let me take my gloves off. And as with everything, we can repurpose your gloves. I have some different seeds here, and I've already planted some pink yarrow. Achillea millefolium is the Latin name. So I put that in here already. And I had to look up the directions to find out how much soil should cover the seeds. That's very important. You don't want too much or too little soil. You want to make it just right. So in this case, it said to barely cover the seeds. So that's all I did, and sprayed some water on top. Now your sprayer, you can use a regular sprayer or more of a pressurized sprayer, or you can even make your own sprinkler bottle. You can take a half-gallon container, that's what most people recommend, and just poke holes through the top with a safety pin. Lots and lots of holes. People like to use a half-gallon jug or a 2-liter bottle because it's easier on the wrist than a whole gallon of water. And a half-gallon will go a long way if you have to water your plants at all. So it works kind of like this. That's pretty good. You just don't ever want to dump water on the seeds, because once those little roots start developing and you dump water on there, then you destroy that whole process. So you need to be really careful with these delicate little babies. Okay, so let's try Asclepias tuberosa, in other words, milkweed or butterfly weed. I collected this in the fall for my own plants, and I'm going to sprinkle some in there. Now you might ask, how many seeds should I put in there? The answer is whatever you feel that you can manage. Now, we are beginners with this method, so we're not going to put too many in there, because if we overfill it, we're going to be stuck with all kinds of tiny little plants that we have to separate their roots, and that could be kind of tedious, and the roots might be fragile. So we're going to keep it, I think I put about 20 in there, which is plenty. I looked it up, and it said you need to cover them with a 1/4 inch of soil. Yes, you will have to do a little bit of your own research to find out things like that, like how much soil do you put on top of the seeds, and what kind of seeds should I sow. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. Okay, that's probably about a 1/4 inch. Pat it down, spray it. Now this is fine to use a sprayer like this because I only have 4 jugs. But if I had a whole bunch of these outside, this motion here could also make your hand sore. Okay, we sprayed it. Now comes the taping part. Here's what you do. You want to just take a little square of duct tape and just hold it down with that little square. And then a lot of people recommend, instead of using a whole piece of tape all the way around, to just go halfway. This way, when it's time to open these, you can do it more easily and put them back together more easily in the spring. Okay, that's one side. And now we'll do the other side. Now that is all set. Oh, guess what? I forgot to do something that's really important. I forgot to put a label inside. So I'm going to open it up. And I can make a label either on an old tongue depressor or on a plastic knife or on a plastic spoon, and place it inside. You might also have real plant labels from a nursery or from your old plants. So this is called butterfly weed. This is the only plant that monarch butterfly caterpillars will eat. So it's really important to put these in your gardens. Our monarch butterflies are in serious danger. Okay, and I'm also going to put today's date on here, 1/20. Stick that inside along the edge somewhere, all the way down. Put your lid right over it, and then tape again. Okay, I still have this piece. And here's the other. The tape doesn't have to be totally airtight. You can leave a little circulation room there. Okay, now in addition to that label, you write the name of the plant on the tape, butterfly weed, with the date. And it's also highly recommended that you make a label to stick on or near the bottom, because whether you use permanent marker or a gardener's marker or a paint pen, those UV rays can make the writing fade. I don't want to cover up any holes, so I'll put it down here on the edge, just like that. Okay, there's one. I also have another one here, and I'm going to work on two more real quickly. I only planted 4 jugs or mini greenhouses today. One thing that many people suggested was to create a journal, create a record of everything you're planting with 5 categories at the top. Date, plant name, date of first germination, and the date and the place that you transplant your plants, and any special notes. There are so many different notes you can record there, and that's why I left 3 spaces. I forgot to mention that this journal will be a great reference for next year when you do your winter sowing again. Okay, so I have all of my jugs here in a milk crate. I was lucky enough to find a milk crate in our garage. But you can be creative and think of any other way that you can put your jugs in a group. Now you want to place the jugs together in a south or east facing sunny spot that allows rain or snow access, and find a way to secure them in case of severe winds. You don't want your tender little babies to be blown away and ruined. You can place all of the jugs in an established planting bed with edges to keep them tucked in. Or you can place them on a deck or patio inside a milk crate like this. Or you can situate planters and heavy objects around them. I've seen people put fencing around them, bricks or rocks, anything that will tuck them in so they don't blow away. Perhaps you can line them up on a bench. Just make sure you secure them in somehow. Bungee cords around the whole group can also provide extra security. The only negative thing about winter sowing is that the jugs are not attractive. So to avoid a situation where my neighbors will have to look at my jugs every day, I'm going to put them in a northeast spot on my deck, and that should work just fine. A little note, if you put your winter sowing jugs in a very sunny spot, then in the spring when the weather warms up, you'll need to move them to a spot that has a little more shade, because you don't want them melting or sizzling to death after all the time and energy and love you put into them. Very important. Now you are done, and you can be lazy for the most part for the next 3 or 4 months. If it's a normal winter, if there is such a thing these days, you shouldn't need to water at all. Let it rain, let it snow, snow, snow. As a matter of fact, if you have a foot of snow on top of your jugs for 3 weeks in a row, that's great. The jugs will only allow a certain amount of moisture in, and they have the drainage holes to let it out. So don't worry about them. That snow is a great thing to have. But you might want to check on your babies every week or so for moisture. You can lift them up and feel their heaviness, or if you see condensation on the inside, that's a good thing. That's what you want. You don't want to overwater them or underwater them, but if they feel dry, you can sprinkle some water inside like we did before, or spray some water inside. Okay? Some people say they never have to do it all winter. Other people say they did it 4 or 5 times in the whole winter period. So keep an eye on them, okay? Enjoy this time. You've set the stage and are now waiting for the show. The anticipation will just kill you. The seeds are pre-wired to know what to do. They follow Mother Nature's plan of rhythm and weather and the length of the daylight. They know when to germinate and grow. That in itself is miraculous to me, isn't it? So let's just let them be now. Let Mother Nature do her work. Now, some seeds can be winter sown from late December through February. They are the tough perennials and cold hardy vegetables. I'm listing some of them here for you. So you might want to stop the tape and do a freeze frame shot or a copy of it. Yes, those cabbages and beets and lettuces can be sown now. For the veggies that grow into one large head, just put one or maybe two seeds in one jug. If both sprout, you can transplant one of them when they're growing and you think the roots are getting pretty well established. Some people mention to not let the wet lettuce touch the top of the lids. So keep that in mind. You don't want your lettuce getting wilted and brown and mushy. Okay, I only did 4 jugs today, but I'll winter sow 3 or 4 more in about 3 weeks. It's probably better to space out the dates of your winter sowing starts to avoid too much work all at once when it's time to transplant. Now let's go ahead a few months. In March through April, you can winter sow your tender annuals and herbs. You'll see them listed here. My list don't include nearly all the plants available for sowing, but there's enough here to get you started with great potential. And all the plants on these lists will work well in zones 6 through 8. If your zone is warmer or colder, you will need to adjust your winter sowing dates. Don't forget, you can always Google winter sowing dates to find out more details. You can Google anything these days. Now, fast forward to springtime. The seeds will sprout as the weather turns warmer. It's now your turn to be the gardener. You got to sit back for a while. Now it's time to step it up a little. By the way, be patient. The plants might not all germinate and grow at the same rates. Some might even take 6 months or a year. So be patient. Don't dump them out if you don't see anything for a while. Watch the weather in the spring. What you don't want to happen is to have a warm spell and then a cold spell, because when that frost comes after a warm front, your seedlings won't be able to survive. If you see that the temperature is going to be less than 45 degrees, go out there and lay a blanket or a sheet over the top of the whole group of plants. That will keep the warmth in. Oh, and don't use an impervious plastic cover. You need some breathing room in there. So what I just said was, if the seedlings are already developed, that's when you need to cover them. If your seeds have not sprouted yet, you don't need to cover them, okay? So only the seedlings, the delicate little plants, need to be covered. Some people add a basic liquid fertilizer at half strength after the seedlings have at least 2 sets of leaves or nodes. Don't forget, it's a liquid, it's a spray, and half strength. You don't want any stronger than that until they transplant or plant the plants in the ground. And in that case, you put the fertilizer or the compost all around the whole group or all around the plant in a circle. You don't want it touching the main plant or the roots. Now, I never fertilize my perennials or shrubs or trees outside because I keep composting them. I always sprinkle compost on them when I have it. So I feel like my soil gives them what they need. But I will add some fertilizer to my annuals and to vegetables. Vegetables definitely need them. As the weather warms into the 60s or 70s steadily, this is when you can start lifting your lids. Or you can cut open a window. Let me just do one here. Cut open a window on one side. Whoopsie. That was too far, but you get the idea. Cut the window open so that you can peek inside and allow for extra ventilation. And then when it gets cooler at night, you just close it. You might have to tape it a little, okay? When you see the plants growing near or out of the top of the jug, you know they are definitely ready to open up and transplant. It's actually a lot of fun to open up that lid and see them pop out like they're just so happy to be free. The people who overplant, they put a lot of seeds in one container, they are probably used to doing this. And a lot of people in the nursery business or greenhouse business or people who belong to gardening clubs will overseed. Then they will separate the tiny little seedlings when they have at least 2 sets of nodes on them and plant them in individual containers. Now, you want to just, if you do that, make sure your containers are deep. It's always best to have deep roots rather than wideness, especially when talking about annuals and perennials and vegetables. So if you don't have real containers like this, you can use solo cups, either the small ones or the bigger ones. Cut holes in the bottom, put them all in a clear bin, all lined up, and poke holes in it. Actually, you turn it upside down. You put all these containers on the lid that also has holes in it underneath, and then you put all the planters in lined up. You put your bin on top of it with holes, many holes on the top, and let that sit outside. And those individual seedlings will continue to grow. And one great thing about this is that you can cut off the tops, and that will create bushier, healthier plants. I just want to mention that I would never discourage you or anyone to not visit and buy plants from nurseries, especially your local nurseries. They have put in the time and the work it takes to prepare and grow beautiful, healthy plants for you to take home with ease. So I love and appreciate nurseries and growers and garden centers and want them to continue growing and prospering. And I actually think that the more you do projects like winter sowing or propagating, the more you're interested in your yard, creating a healthy ecosystem and making it more beautiful. So then the more plants you will buy from nurseries. So it's like one hand feeds the other. And if you have a good relationship with your nursery, you can always ask them to order plants for you. If they don't have them, then you can grow these plants and in the fall collect seeds from those to winter sow next winter. So I give all nurseries a big high five, especially this year, for cranking out those plants at a time when many more people are so interested in the wonder of gardening. Okay, let's get back to seeds. You might be asking, what kinds of seeds should I plant? Now, some of you might have seeds in your refrigerator or freezer already, because if you do, they last for years and even longer in the freezer. You can also buy some in nurseries or online, and seed catalogs are a lot of fun, but I just want to give you a warning about those because you can get lost in those seed catalogs for hours and hours. And that's not a bad thing always, but the best thing to do is to figure out which plants are best for your yard in your conditions. Think about the planting areas you have or plan to create. There are 3 main conditions or categories that are really important when choosing your plants. They are the amount of sunlight or shade, the amount of moisture or dryness, and the other thing is your soil. And the main thing in your soil being the pH level. Is it more acidic or alkaline? So these are 3 things to identify when choosing your plants. I could get into more detail here, but you can do some searching on your own, especially about the soil. You can also go to your local county extension and order a soil test for certain different parts of your yard, and that will give you a real good idea of which plants you should plant in that area. Or you can buy your own soil test kits in garden centers, and they save you a lot of money in the long run. So generally, it's all about the right plant in the right place. You've probably heard that before. And if you give your plants what they require, then their chances of healthy and prolific lives will increase immensely. And that means less watering for you, less soil additives and less work for you. And don't be afraid to use the internet. Everything you want to know is right there at your fingertips. You can enter search terms asking questions such as plants for shade and dry soil in Zone 7, or native plants that like sun in Ohio. You get the idea. And once you get that list of the right plants for your yard, then you can do your shopping for your seeds or your plants. And don't forget, add .edu to your searches. That will give you more research-based information and cut out a lot of the ads and such. I really want to put in a plug for all of the native insects, birds, and animals in your area. Choose some plant species that help them out. Living things are starving and diminishing quickly. Oh, you might think, ooh, insects, but insects are good. The native ones that are local to your area are what we call beneficial or good bugs, and they're working really hard to keep our natural ecosystems in balance. Unfortunately, some get eaten, but they are needed for that reason as well. It's that circle of life thing. It's cruel, but forever necessary. So it would be great if all of you could include some sunflowers, some goldenrod, some butterfly milkweed, or some coneflowers and asters. These are just a few. Look them up. I live in Pennsylvania, Zone 7, so I might use a different list than you will, because different insects are native to different areas. So you might see that a plant is native, but if it's native in California, we might not have those types of butterflies or moths or animals out there that eat the same kind of nectar or seeds or plants. So try to pick local native plants. And one last thing, it's not the most positive thing in the world, but it's a warning that we all have to heed. And if you are buying seeds from a big box store or from an unknown nursery, please check to see if they use neonicotinoids. Some seed houses are still coating their seeds with this insecticidal chemical. This toxin causes serious harm and possible death to many insects and therefore up the food chain or the food web. The EPA has stepped in to help quell the use of neonics, for short, but the job is not nearly done. So please do your research. If you're shopping online, check to see if they use neonics. Nurseries are required to have labels in their plants specifying if they use neonicotinoids, but that might not always follow through. So if you see that sign, it might not be worth it to buy that plant. You want to see those insects eating your nectar and buzzing around in your yards. They bring lots of lively, or should I say lively, activity. On that note, I know I can go off on my tangents, but I feel that this is worthy information that I'm obligated to share with everyone. You might know it already, but some of you might not. And keep the word going. The more we know, the better off we will all be. So in a nutshell, or in a milk jug, if you're interested in winter sowing, now is the time to jump on board. Even if you start with one jug now and one jug in March, you'll get a little experience, you'll get that fever and enthusiasm, and hopefully you'll keep on growing and growing. It will be so exciting to see your plants grow. But you know what? If you have mistakes or failures, who cares? It's absolutely okay. It's a learning experience. What have you got to lose? A few milk jugs and a little bit of soil and a pack or two of seeds? If you'd like to see more of my videos, please subscribe. It will help me out, and you will be notified whenever I have new videos about gardening, or when I interview people who love plants or inspiring women. So thanks for joining me, and please leave some questions and comments and share any information that you may have. And don't forget to check out that Seed Sowers group on Facebook. You'll love it. And there's so many great ideas on there. This is just a basic way of doing it, but there's so much more to learn and enjoy. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.